All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Lance Beck. I'm President and CEO for the Greater Spokane Valley Chamber of Commerce. We're pleased to welcome you to today's call. As we get started here, I wanted to thank our regional partners with Greater Spokane Incorporated and the West Plains Chamber for helping us pull these calls together each week, slating an agenda for each week that's relevant to what topics are going on in the world. So joining us today and during the call, we're going to have an update on the Paycheck Protection Program, and then we'll dive into some discussion on the forgiveness period and the forgiveness process that we're envisioning coming up on those loans. And so joining us on the call today, we're pleased to have from the Small Business Administration, we've got Joel Nania, the manager of the local SBA branch here in Spokane. We also are welcoming Mark Costello, Deputy District Director for SBA out of the Seattle branch there. And then additionally, we'll have Washington Trust Bank's President, COO, Jack Heath, talking about the process that they've got going right now on this second phase of funding here for the PPP. And then additionally joining us from Eide Bailey, Adam Sweet, one of their principals, talking about some of the details on how to prepare yourself to best react when we get to the point of needing to document and submit for forgiveness on those loans. And so I'm confident that most of us on the call are familiar now with the technology that we're using, so Zoom is our platform. That being said, just some additional guidelines for the call. We do ask that you keep your mics muted throughout the call. For questions, we ask that you utilize the chat function. So in the chat box there, please enter your first name, your last name, along with your business name there, so that we can address questions as they come through. We will try and address questions section by section as we move through the call. So if your question specifically for a speaker, please hold that for the moment when we get into that speaker presenting. That way we can hopefully address all questions directly there. We do have quite a few that were submitted as we started and through the registration process. So those have been forwarded and hopefully that will be addressed during the conversation by the presenters. And so again, please hold the questions for those presenters until we get through their conversation, as much of what's been asked will be addressed during the call. So at this time, I'd also like to throw it out there. If you have additional questions following the call, you can send those directly to us at the Valley Chamber, and we will get those forwarded and routed to the appropriate speaker for follow-up. That email address to send those questions to is info@SpokaneValleyChamber.org. Colin will throw that in the chat box for you right here, so you can copy that down should you come up with something that you'd like to get answered here and need some help directing it to the speakers. So at this time, I'd like to go ahead and welcome the team from SBA, Mark and Joel. I know you're on the line here and it looks like we've got your mics unmuted. So I want to first thank you both for taking time out of your day to join us and answer some of the driving questions that are going on here in the community, as well as give us an update on this second phase of funding in the PPP. And so at this time, I'll turn it over to you, gentlemen, and we're excited to hear from you.
Yeah, thanks, Lance. I've got Mark Costello on the line with us as well. I'm here in Spokane as the manager of the Spokane branch office, and we're part of the Seattle district, and I work very closely with Mark and with our district director, Carrie Hurd, from the west side, and we cover all of Washington and the 10 counties of North Idaho. So if you hear my phone ringing in the background while I'm talking, it's because the phone's been ringing fairly regularly, and we're doing our best to help as many small businesses as we can. What I thought we would do is have Mark, are you there?
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about the current state of affairs in terms of the PPP loan dollars and numbers of loans that have been made to small businesses in this second round. But Mark, you want to enlighten us on that?
Absolutely. Thank you, Joel, and thanks for the opportunity to present, you guys. Just for background, from the CARES Act, initially there was a $349 billion allocation of funding to support the Paycheck Protection Program, and a couple of weeks ago the funding for that was used up, and we saw somewhere in the neighborhood of about 1.6 million Paycheck Protection Program loans made for right around 342 or $3 billion. Subsequently, a second round was authorized and funded and in fact launched last Monday. So we're approximately a week and a half now into the second round of Paycheck Protection Program funding. The money that was allocated for the second round was approximately $310 billion. And what we have seen to date is rather interesting. So the first round, we saw an average PPP loan amount of about 209,000. To date, under the second round of the program, the average loan amount has been reduced significantly down to about $79,000. So where we sit right now, and really the major takeaway as far as the status of the program, is that as of today, we have exhausted about $183 billion of that $310 billion PPP allocation. And interestingly, significantly more loans being put together for the program. So probably somewhere in the range of 2.3 million or even 2.4 million PPP loans under the second round of funding. So overall, the PPP program has actually resulted in funding for more than 5 million businesses at this point in time. So again, kind of the takeaway is that by my calculations, we still have somewhere in the range of 130 billion dollars available in the PPP program. So what we kind of think was happening there is that there was a significant queuing of PPP applications in anticipation of the second round of funding. And once that our lending partners worked through those backlogs, we ended up where we are today, which looks like about a utilization rate of somewhere in the range of $2 billion a day. So by my calculations, and for what it's worth, seems like that is going to result in the program being available for probably at least another several weeks, if not even 6 weeks, maybe 2 months, if we're on a $2 billion a day burn rate out of 125 or $130 billion. Additionally, I think the program ends up getting somewhat replenished as a result of some cancellations of loans. I think we probably have experienced that with some of the companies that have re-examined whether or not they wanted to take approved PPP loans in light of their ability to access other financing. So that would bode positively, it seems to me, as far as kind of the availability of funding going forward for those businesses that are, really still looking at this opportunity. And I think our feeling is that they do continue to exist out there. And I think the good news out of this is we've got a very committed and competent network of participating lending institutions partnering with SBA in this effort. In fact, they're doing all of the heavy lifting here in distributing these funds. And my sense is that they're going to continue to be with us, throughout the duration of this effort. So when the program initially launched, I think there were challenges in that a lot of lenders were trying to deal with their own existing customers, and immediately dealing with significant backlogs, not necessarily knowing exactly what that thing was going to look like in terms of the systems and so forth. A lot of those issues, I think, have been resolved, and we have kind of an open field, if you will, for businesses to be able to go out and access PPP funds from a variety of different lending institutions out there in the community. So we're just really grateful for that partnership, and I think that that's going to bode very well going forward through the remainder of this particular program. So
Yeah, and I would add, Mark,
go ahead, Joel.
that on the other side, the EIDL, that portal closed, as probably everybody knows, on April 15th. And then it reopened, was that this week, Mark, I guess?
Yes, yeah, it was
reopened
Monday.
For farm and ag-related businesses only. However, we're still kind of holding out that potentially that could reopen. We just don't know if and when, but we're hoping that could happen again. But I've talked to a number of Spokane businesses that went through that program and were able to get their cash advance as well as get funding through that as well. So we'll just, we'll certainly communicate with our area chambers over here in the Inland Northwest if that portal does happen to pop open again for other than ag-related businesses. And I too would like to thank our lenders. I know we have a few of them on the call today, but by and large, the lenders in our community have just done a tremendous job. There are now nationally 5,422 lenders participating, and they got handed a very difficult task and have done a great job of taking care of people.
Absolutely.
And Mark, maybe we ought to address, before we run out of our little bit of time here, the PPP forgiveness process as much as we can, because I know that's a focus of a lot of the questions.
Does that sound okay, Lance?
Yeah, I'd like to jump into questions if we can. We've got another 6 to 10 minutes that we can slot for you guys here. So if I can tee those up if you'd like, and a lot of them will probably trigger answers to the forgiveness. If you want to give a broad overview quickly, or let's go with that first. So I'll let you do that.
You bet. Okay, thanks, Lance. And just to cap off the sort of the program update as far as activity. The state of Washington numbers, and unfortunately we don't have the activity broken down to the county level, but for Washington state, under the PPP, about 81,000 approvals for about 12 billion. So I think we have a pretty representative share of the overall PPP activity here in the state.
We do get asked quite frequently about the county by county numbers, and we just don't have those to share at this point. We don't know any more than you do on that, and certainly if we get those numbers, we'll make sure that you get that information.
Absolutely. So to the issue of sort of the loan forgiveness piece. Unfortunately, we're still waiting for something kind of comprehensive that's gonna walk people through that process, both from what our expectation is of how the lenders are going to be involved in the process, and what exactly is going to be required of the PPP loan applicants. My sense is that first of all, SBA is going to utilize our lenders significantly in this process, that at some point in time at or around that 8-week mark after receiving funding, or possibly after, that the PPP applicants are going to receive some kind of communication that's going to direct them to provide certain documentation back to the lending institution that they got the PPP from. And the idea there is going to be as a means of verifying exactly what the loan proceeds were in fact used for. So whether that's going to be some kind of a pre-structured spreadsheet with attachments or something along those lines, I really don't exactly know what that's going to look like. But I'm guessing it's going to be an electronic process where those documents are going to be uploadable. And again, my sense is that we're certainly going to include our lenders in that and leverage their capabilities in aggregating that information and probably either making a recommendation or a determination as to whether or not the loan should be forgiven. And keeping in mind, just as by way of background, kind of what the basic requirements and parameters are here, that being that for total loan forgiveness, the borrower needs to utilize at least 75% of the PPP loan proceeds for payroll purposes. Any additional funds are somewhat limited in what they can be used for, that being things like rent, utilities, and interest on existing debt. I know that there are, and we continue to receive many inquiries from folks that are trying to manage through this process. They've received their PPP funding. I think the first round of PPP borrowers are perhaps 4 weeks into this process, and they're wanting to clarify or confirm that what they're doing is correct and isn't going to create an issue with regard to loan forgiveness. And sometimes those questions are difficult to answer because we do not have the specific guidance to share. So what I kind of tend to do is come back on some basic sort of ideas in this thing. One, which I already mentioned, is keeping in mind that 75% of loan utilization needs to be for payroll purposes. Number two, recognizing that the loan amount itself was calculated based on an average payroll, typically from 2019, which corresponded probably to a certain level of employees. The idea here is that the program was intended to pretty much return businesses to that level of employment that they were at probably pre-corona crisis, if not at 2019. So for example, if that was 10 employees, the intent then would be with the loan proceeds that the business owner is going to make every reasonable attempt to either retain or rehire employees to that pre-COVID level or the level of employment from 2019 that corresponded with the loan amount. So then logically, business owners are asking the question, hey, I've got people out there that are on the enhanced unemployment and they don't necessarily want to come back. What do I do with that? I've got people that are just going to be sitting at home. Is that okay? So the answer to the first question is there was some additional guidance provided on the as far as the case where employees won't or can't come back. What we're looking for basically is a good faith effort on the part of the business owner. Documentation that they in fact made the job offer would be a great step in the right direction. And then the employee can kind of do with that what they want, but the employer has done what would reasonably be expected of them in that process. Ultimately, what's going to happen though is we're going to be looking at, I believe, that proportionate allocation of the PPP amount. In other words, did the business owner spend 75% or more on payroll? If they did, and they made a reasonable attempt to bring back or retain to that pre-COVID level, I think they're going to be in good shape. A lot of times what's happening is people aren't able to rehire or retain at that level, and they know and they can see that they're going to have money left over. And that is it. And so the question is going to be, is that going to somehow impair their forgivability? You know, is that going to impact the forgiveness of the loan? And what I've been advising people is, if you have money left over, you can plan on returning that money, essentially paying the loan down, and the money that was spent, as long as it conforms to that 75% or more payroll calculation or parameter, you're going to be in good shape. So I know that that doesn't address all of the issues, and there are any number of different variations on what I was talking about that people are running into. I know there's been discussion at the congressional level about, even at this point, changing some of the parameters on the program as far as the percentage that would be required for payroll. But I don't believe that that's going to be particularly productive for the folks that are already 4 weeks into using this program. And so what I would suggest is that folks stay abreast of this guidance as it continues to be disseminated. We're anticipating a fairly substantial set of guiding documents or policies, if you will, regarding forgiveness, the process, and something that would also spell out some of these different scenarios and how they would be approached as far as forgiveness. My hope is that there's going to be a level of flexibility that's going to work in favor of the vast majority of businesses. So with that, Joel, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I just wanted everybody to know I posted the FAQs, which is updated May 5th. And there's a ton of good information. The majority, I mean, I know we can't answer everybody's questions on the group chat, but in this period, but a lot of the questions that you're asking are answered in those FAQs. So read through those, and those do get updated periodically at the treasury.gov website.
Okay, guys, I want to get into a few of these questions directly. I know Marcelo Morales had a question regarding the original P3 structure to supplement the payroll for an expected duration of the 8-week period there. If assumptions around closures are extended beyond that timeline, which we now have already seen that looking like for a lot of businesses that may have already qualified, that's going to be the case. Are businesses likely to be eligible for eligible for a second allotment of PPP in their coverage period if a longer extension is required, or are their loan amounts going to, for now under the program, stay the same as they were?
Right. So Lance, the rules as they exist right now limit a borrower to 1 PPP loan. However, you know, what might be coming in the future, either with new funding or even new rules related to that remaining funding that I discussed, is sort of a bit of an unknown. It's certainly possible. I mean, I think, yeah, the reality of it is, in an ideal world, the 8 weeks that were contemplated in the original program would have done the trick and bridged a business out to the point of economic normalcy again. But clearly we're not quite getting to that yet. So I think one of the things, as a further answer to that question, is to stay tuned for additional resources and programs that are going to be put in place to support businesses going forward as we kind of hopefully start to come out of this period of sort of stagnation and start to re-engage, I think it's logical to imagine that SBA is going to have to be working on some additional tools, maybe within the framework of our existing loan programs, for example, that are going to be less restrictive and more constructive for businesses that are looking to now relaunch and have other kinds of needs associated with that, whether that's facilities related, whether that's marketing related, those kinds of things. I'm hopeful that our agency is going to be pushing out additional tools that are going to support businesses in that regard.
Okay, and then a question that we've addressed on previous calls is related to payroll and incurred dates versus accrued dates on that. And so I think that was one of the ways that you have expressed there's flexibility in this. The payments being made during your 8-week period for forgiveness, the payroll periods could extend out beyond that 8-week period as long as the payments are made potentially in advance, or also covering payments that were made prior to the approval of your loan, but within the guidance of the program. Are you able to address that question?
Yeah, it's a great question. So basically, it's sort of the cash versus accrual question. And I can tell you that there hasn't been specific guidance that I'm aware of put out on that. But my sense is maybe the appropriate approach would be accrual based, so that a business is going to be able to, rather than necessarily showing canceled checks and things like that, they're going to be able to actually show what was the payroll cost incurred during that 8-week period of time, and then somehow or other be able to trace that to monies that were actually expended. But I think that, to me, the driver should be the accrued expenses.
And every business just needs to make sure that you keep good records of the payroll expenditures that you're making during that 8-week period of time.
Gotcha. Moving on from that one, the question on 75% spent on payroll of the total loan amount, or on what's spent. And I think you've clarified that as any money not spent can be paid back, and so thus is also you won't have to take that as a further loan. But it would be 75% of money spent needs to be spent on payroll.
And if you spend 75% on payroll, the other 25% is also forgiven.
Forgiven, yeah, of what is spent, correct?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. So works both ways, but it does have to, 75% of whatever you spend needs to be spent on payroll.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Okay, another question. If a company uses a temp agency to fill staffing needs during this time, are those expenses eligible to be accrued as payroll expense?
They're probably employed technically by the temp agency. That's sort of a statement and a question. So I think
I would think that if they're employed, look at it this way: the temp agency, if they're employees of the temp agency, may have already applied for a PPP loan of their own, and would be paying those employees using those PPP funds. So I would think most likely those temp agency employees would not be included as part of your payroll necessarily.
Okay.
Thing I'd mention on that, though, if those temp employees are being hired because you're unable to hire back people that are employed by you now, then you'll get credit for that, correct?
Right. Yeah, Jack, good. That's a good comment. So this idea of kind of getting back to that target headcount can be, rehiring folks that were laid off, retaining folks that are already there, but also for those that they weren't able to bring back, they can go out and use the funds to hire new people and pay them during the 8-week period.
Okay, and then another question came in on the subject. if they're not able to utilize all the funds, the remaining fund that they borrowed can be converted, and that turns into a 24-month term note at 1%.
That's
Yeah, it's
correct
a
at
2-year
1%.
with a 6-month deferment. So you're right. And obviously, depending on the size of the loan, that could be certainly a manageable arrangement. But it could also be onerous given the relatively short payback period. So.
Okay. So we're going to take all the questions that came in for SBA, and we'll do follow up with Joel and Mark here to get additional answers, and then those will be in the full Q&A recap that we should have available by sometime tomorrow afternoon on the page where we post the video recap for this call. So we're going to move over to, at this time, thank you, Joel and Mark. If you can stay on the line, we'd appreciate it for anything towards the end, but I'd like to move over to Jack and get from the lender's perspective, since they're going to be tasked with a lot of this forgiveness, and also just a touch, Jack, if you wouldn't mind, on process still open. Obviously, there are still funds available, and we've seen that in the news of late, that even with our own Attorney General as part of the 24 state pack asking for additional emphasis put on expanding eligibility within that to additional businesses. If you could jump in here and give us an update from the lender's perspective with Washington Trust, where you guys are at, and then kind of moving down the line of the heads up for forgiveness, obviously what we know now, with the knowledge that we do have CPAs coming on at the end of the call to give the even more detailed version of that. So
I'll leave the repayment expertise to the CPAs. I would just say a couple of thoughts. We're a little over $1.4 billion in total loans, and 5,800 in total loans that we've processed. And so we're getting them in. And if you have a complete application, we're completing in a day or two. So there's not a backlog as it sits today with most of the lenders I've visited with. What we've been running into a little bit is people applying with our institution and having an open app with another, and that causes some issues. So I would check with before you start applying to multiple lenders, check with your existing lender and see where you are in that queue, to prevent that from us going through that whole exercise and not being able to get those done. The other thing I was going to mention is there's a couple of programs out there to be aware of. State of Idaho has announced a $10,000 grant program for small businesses who haven't participated in the PPP or the EIDL program, and they have $300 million in that queue. So that should be a great program for people in Idaho who are interested in that. And then there's also the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program that's out there and should be active, we would hope, again, and that's an opportunity as well. And just touching quickly on that is SBA Direct. It's personal and corporate financial information and viability as of 12/31/19, but it'll allow you to recap working capital and work through that. And I think that's a great program. And Mark, where does that stand today?
Oh, Jack, the EIDL program?
Yeah.
Yeah. So as Joel indicated, it's been going through some different iterations, and currently the program is actually open to ag businesses. So we did receive additional funding as part of that second round of CARES Act, and it was, I believe, $50 billion for the EIDL program and an additional $10 billion for the cash advance feature of the EIDL loan. We've got, as I understand it, probably 1.2 million quick cash advances have been pushed out. The actual EIDL approval process is something that's been somewhat limited, maybe hindered. I think they've done about 50,000 of those, but we've been led to believe that the application volume was in fact 5 million. So there's a considerable backlog in the EIDL program. For those businesses that have yet to pursue the PPP and were thinking that the EIDL was something that might be a fit, I would really encourage them to go back and take another look at the PPP as certainly a more direct source of immediate funding. There's just frankly a lot of question about the timing, if not the funding behind the EIDL. We know that some businesses have in fact received these loans, but a considerable amount have not. Thank
you. I think the other part that I'd just say is around the forgiveness piece of it is this is not this program is intended specifically to put people back to work and to supplement the rents and other things that qualify under the program. So don't be afraid of turning funds back in and turning that out over that period of time. And you can make the decision to hold those funds and term them and then pay them back at any time. It's simple interest, no prepayment. So if guidance, those early in as of April 3rd, the guidance will be very tight to the period of time that you'll probably be making your decision around prepayment. You can do that at any time. So I would caution you to be very conservative and have very strong records around how you're deploying the funds. And secondly, not be in a huge rush to repay all those funds. You have the ability to term those out and see if more guidance comes that may allow you to utilize more in the future.
I think that's really good perspective there on the aspect that the terms are favorable, and so take advantage of those in the current climate, because we do see new guidance being shifted, and we do see our legislators working to again work on businesses' behalf to extend eligibility, make it as broadly applicable as possible. And so that's definitely a key takeaway we have right now, is that you take advantage of the terms of those notes and hold your water a little bit until we get a little additional guidance there. Mark and Joel, we did have a question come in regards to EIDL that maybe you can answer real quick before we shift gears to Adam Sweet. With regards to Eide, a lot of organizations have received their advance dollars, but no documentation has come through for guidance on the actual loan. And I know those loans are running through SBA Direct there. And so can you provide information on what a business can expect as far as timing? I know that system had quite a bit of backlog and they've been charging through it, but is there a point when you need to reach out again to SBA for additional information if you haven't received that?
Yeah, the timing on turnaround has been kind of interesting, because in some cases it's very rapid and in other cases it's slow. Additionally, I do get a lot of questions because people all of a sudden will see $10,000 or $2,000 in their checking account, and it will say in the notation SBA, but they don't get an email. They don't get any notifications. So I do get a lot of questions from people like, is this legitimate? What's this money for? As far as then the follow-up on the loan portion of the EIDL, what they should get is an email that indicates that they've been approved for a loan, and it'll show a range, and they can dial in that range from 0 to whatever that maximum is. Maybe it's 500,000 or 100,000, and they can actually dial in that range, kind of like with a little zipper affair. But in terms of when that happens, following, I don't know, Mark, we really kind of don't know. It's just, I do know they're working on them 24 hours a day, and they're doing things as fast as possible.
And I was going to mention the terms on that are very, very favorable. So just be patient in getting your information out. And they're also simple interest, no prepayment penalty. So in the event you decide you don't want to go through with that program, you can pay those back quickly.
Yeah, the terms are 3.75% interest amortized over 30 years.
And 2.75 for nonprofits.
Correct. Thanks, Jack.
Yeah. And I guess the one thing is that there doesn't seem to be a correlation between receipt of the quick cash advance and approval of the actual loan. I think I indicated there probably been 1.2 million of the cash advances made, but something like 50,000 loan approvals. So they're coming from a completely different bucket and a completely different part of the operation, apparently.
Uh,
I was
Go
also
ahead.
going to just quickly, I had the question about forbearances on commercial and consumer loans and where that is and what we expect from repos and foreclosures going forward. We aren't anticipating huge activity. The real estate markets continue to be strong. We're proactively deferring principal and interest payments for consumers and for businesses on real estate and on consumer debt. And if it's related to the COVID issue, we encourage you to reach out to your lenders and they'll be very proactive in deferring those things. So for us looking forward to see visibility of what the challenges will be, this will be a challenge because many of those loans have deferred principal and interest payments for 90 days or for 6 months. So we won't have good visibility into that market for another 6 to 7 months, unfortunately. But we anticipate it being continuing to be fairly strong.
Jack, we had another question come in regarding home loan processing right now and whether the credit score has been raised for qualifying for a loan.
No, it has not. The credit score, a couple of things on home loans. One is Fannie and Freddie have issued some guidance that will allow us to not do full appraisals in the event we can't get a appraiser out to do the appraisal valuation for your home. So they've loosened some criteria and the credit standards have stayed the same. What you're probably referencing is some of the large national banks have changed their underwriting for second mortgages and other things because of concerns, and some of the markets around jumbo loans have tightened up, but we are doing business as usual at this point in time at Washington Trust on home loans.
Awesome.
And I would also mention are having record months.
Gotcha. Okay, so thank you, Jack. We're going to shift over to Adam Sweet. Adam, if you're able to unmute with Eide Bailey here, I'd like to get some more technical information out regarding from a CPA stance as to things that should be done. I know there's been a lot of helpful hints dropped in the chat box, but we'll turn it over to Adam for a few minutes here.
Yeah, thanks, Lance. So Adam Sweet, I'm a principal. I'm an attorney, a tax attorney by training, but I'm a principal with Eide Bailey in our national tax office. I sit in Spokane, but really I'm a resource to our whole firm, and I'm part of the team that is leading the charge, at least from Eide Bailey's point, on the PPP loans. So I thought I'd hit just a couple of points, maybe technical points our clients are looking at right now. Probably the number one question we've been getting recently, and I don't know whether you guys covered this before I joined up, was originally in the CARES Act, there was very loose requirements for being eligible for the loan. And there was really, you could apply for a PPP loan and you weren't required to demonstrate need. In other words, you weren't required to show that you didn't have retained earnings or that you couldn't access loans from another source. And that has all been kind of thrown up in the air with additional FAQs from the SBA and the Treasury in the last couple of weeks that first started, it appeared to target publicly traded companies, but it's kind of trickled down to maybe indicate that even closely held and private businesses, if they have retained earnings or equity, or if they have access to capital from another source, that potentially they were never eligible for the PPP loan in the first place. It's a difficult environment there because these FAQs didn't exist at the time that the program opened up. So when people were borrowing as of April 3rd, there was nothing out there on this. And so suddenly everyone's loans are funded, 350 billion kind of goes out the door. And then we have these additional FAQs. So I bring that up because originally what the SBA said last week was you can return your loan by May 7th without penalty. And they've pushed that back now and said that you can return the loan by May 14th without penalty. And what they said in the FAQ is that they intend to issue interim guidance that is supposed to provide more rules for how you determine whether you should pay that money back. So that is probably the number one question we've been getting over the last couple of days is, let's say I'm a business and let's say I had a loan, but I also have existing cash in the bank. Or let's say I have a line of credit that I could tap. Does the fact that you have the line of credit, does the fact that you have retained earnings, does that somehow disqualify you for the PPP loan? Again, there's nothing in the statute that says that, but I think that's what everyone's kind of holding their breath for here. So I just say everyone, if you've heard mention of a safe harbor about paying the money back. That's what this is. We're hopefully going to have guidance in the next 7 days on that before you have to pay the money back. So,
And Adam and Mark, my question would be, have we gotten those FA or those questions into the SBA really encouraging forgiveness if in fact you're driving to what the program was intended to do, and that is bringing people back to employment regardless of your capacity to do it that you would not normally do did you not receive that funding from the program? Because I think that would help solve a lot of the qualification issues that these companies are struggling with, where they've been 4 weeks in, brought employees back. They maybe would make different decisions regardless of their financial condition if that program wasn't available.
yeah, absolutely, Jack. I mean, just to echo your point, that absolutely, that we look at it from it's the Paycheck Protection Program, right? Protecting paychecks. And so if you take this loan away, what's going to happen? Well, these businesses are going to put people back in unemployment. So I just echo your point 100%. Sorry, I didn't know whether the SBA put the SBA on the spot.
No, I
Maybe,
agree. And the only thing I would say too, and I don't want to get into a deal where because I'm a representative of SBA, it's sometimes difficult, but this notion where we're seeing formal guidance coming out after the fact, to me, I see that, and I guess I understand where some of it's coming from, but my firm belief is that it would be unfair and unjust and really inconceivable that SBA or Treasury or whoever it is would be able to go back and hold a business owner accountable for rules that were not in place at the time they got their money and used it as they saw fit in accordance with what they understood were the rules of the program. So it's a tricky situation.
yeah,
And I agree with you, Mark. And I'd say in defense of the SBA, the challenge is that public companies accessed $820 million of the proceeds because the guidance wasn't out there. So where the big backlash has come to the Ruth Chris and the LA Lakers and the large public companies have accessed the program and now have prepaid it. So that's where this came from. And our hope is that guidance comes out, because as you can hear from the SBA tone, they're really trying to get those funds out for these small businesses and drive the economic stimulus. And so we're very hopeful on that guidance.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So, I mean, otherwise, I think the big thing on everyone's mind is this 8-week covered period to demonstrate that you've incurred eligible expenses for forgiveness is running for basically everyone that's been funded. And even for people that don't quite realize it, that the first dollar that hits your account, that clock starts clicking right away. And the frustrating thing, everyone's already mentioned it here in the call, but there are probably more unanswered questions at this point than answered questions in terms of the forgiveness. And it starts with even from as simple as, is it an accrual or cash basis concept? When we say that you need to incur eligible expenditures during the 8 weeks, and when we say that 75% of your eligible expenditures during the 8 weeks need to go to payroll, is that an accrual or cash basis? If you have if you have a payroll payment that falls outside that 8-week period, but it relates to payroll expenses during the 8-week period, does that count? And the answer is we don't know. That the statutory language has both accrual and cash basis language. I think it uses the word incurred and or paid, but it's difficult to give clients any type of assurance when they're trying to model this out. And they say, Eide Bailey, well, what do I do? And we say, well, cash payments surely work, but does that mean you need to set up a special payroll to match the 8-week period? Hopefully not. Hopefully it's some type of an accrual basis concept, but we don't know. Similar, what if you pay a bonus another very common question, what if you pay a bonus to employees during the 8 weeks to bring them back to work, let's say? Does the 100% of that bonus count towards your payroll? or are you somehow forced to accrue that bonus over a full 52 annual period and bring it back to that 8 weeks? So I don't know, not to put the SBA people on the spot, but if they have, they're probably getting similar questions or thoughts on those.
Well, bear in mind too, the borrower can spend more than 75% of those loan funds on payroll and payroll-related expenses. The idea is to bring people back at the level that they were at before they were laid off, before the business closed down. But the benchmark is at 75%. As far as bonusing out, Mark, I don't know if you've got a feel for that, but bonusing out that money just because it's forgivable, I think.
No, Adam's bringing up exactly the very, very similar fact kind of situations that we started hearing just as soon as that first round of funding started to be dispersed. People are thinking, hey, I got the money, now what? And so to the question, for example, and I alluded to it earlier, the accrual versus cash. I mean, that's a fantastic question. You'd like to think that we would have come out with something on that by now, but we haven't. So yeah, it's been problematic as far as things like accelerated, payments, increases in wages, bonuses, and those kinds of things. The kind of answers that I've been giving to people are that they would want to make sure that whatever they're doing is consistent with their business practices and maybe driven by sort of a sound logic, sound business decision, if you will. So for example, just a lot of businesses, the idea of bringing people back to work and having them work might in and of itself warrant some additional compensation. To me, that makes pretty good sense in perhaps in the current environment, depending on what kind of business it is. So I just think that people need to be thinking about what they're doing and make sure that the decisions that they make with respect to that funding are consistent and they're supportable. I kind of come from the SBA lending background of operating where there's a lot of gray area in terms of our policies, and my ongoing advice to lenders has always been, hey, make sure that if you're in that gray area and making a decision, that you have documentation and that you have a logical basis for doing what you're doing. And SBA, whether it's SBA or whoever it is that's ultimately going to have a say in this, is going to be receptive to that, I believe, especially given the uncertainty that we're operating in the context of. So,
and what makes us nervous? It's actually, I'm very happy to have SBA people on the call, because I think what makes us nervous too is that, and I know it's not even just the SBA, it's the Treasury Department. The Secretary Mnuchin's been pretty prominent in some of the policy, but some of the rules that have come out, like for instance, the 75% rule is nowhere in the statute. And so it makes us nervous, because I'm a tax attorney and I'd like to be able to look at the law and interpret the law and say, these are the rules. And it looks like at times the government's taking some pretty liberal interpretations and not always borrower friendly, interpretations. And so it makes us nervous, I suppose, from an advisor standpoint, that again, the time's ticking and you want to give guidance, but you're just worried you're going to give guidance and the next day there's going to be a new surprise in the FAQ.
Right.
Adam, we had a question come in regards to payroll taxes and whether, since they're typically paid quarterly, if you incur them, or if a borrower can prepay in June for July if their payment's going to fall outside.
I sure hope it's an accrual concept, so you don't have to do that. I mean, same thing. Think about this. Think about, we have lots of clients that pay year-end bonuses. And those bonuses are in that 2.5 times payroll factor for the loan, because for your loan, you're taking total comp for the year. dividing it by 12 and times it by 2.5. So that's an annualized concept. So you sure would hope that during the 8 weeks, if you traditionally pay a bonus at the end of the year, that there's some way that you can accrue that over the 8 weeks. And I would hope that's the same answer for the payroll tax, because otherwise you're forced to do things that, to the SBA's point here, things that you wouldn't normally do, special payrolls, special payroll tax payments that you wouldn't normally do. And hopefully you're not forced to do that. Hopefully a borrower is not forced to do that.
Definitely. Okay, we're running close to our hour and we want to be respectful of everyone's schedules, as we know a lot of meetings back right up against each other these days. So I want to thank all the speakers today for your time and your efforts. Obviously a very hard subject to identify firm answers right now. I think we've got a lot out there, obviously, that we can at least give some initial guidance there. We do have, there is a very helpful document. It was put in the comments earlier, but from the AICPA group that has some guidance on expectations. And I believe Adam has a few documents from Eide Bailey's side that we'll have available via the recap email that'll go out with the video link and then the document links. There was a question in regards to where to look for updates, and I know I can share that our team, that all of the chambers locally are on top of this and linked in with SBA and Treasury, and then our local lenders as well. And I can just assure you, if you're on the call, you will be the first to know immediately as these details come out, as this is something we are very aware of the business community's need for guidance here. And so, and then that additional note where Jack and Adam had mentioned, the driving fact back to SBA is that this information is really needed as soon as possible. And so that part is not lost on anyone here. One big takeaway, again, there are funds available. So if you're on this call and you haven't applied for Paycheck Protection Program, it's not too late. That window's not closed. And then again, to anybody who asked a question and maybe it wasn't addressed directly, we do follow up directly with everybody who had submitted questions. And so just expect an email from our team at the Valley Chamber following up and connecting you with the right resource to get your question answered directly if it wasn't in the call. Again, the call will be posted and available for rewatch by later this afternoon. The full Q&A guide will also be posted on that page. That takes us a couple days to pull together, so look for that by Monday at the latest. And then again, should you have an additional question that wasn't answered directly, please go ahead and email that to us if it comes up later in the next day or so and you think of it, at info@SpokaneValleyChamber.org. We're happy to connect you with any of the resources that were on the call today. So again, thank you, gentlemen, for taking the time for us. We're going to give you guys all about 30 seconds back in your day, and we look forward to seeing everybody again next Thursday for next week's call. We're working on a couple topic discussions, should have that ready for posting by Monday, so look for that link and that invite coming out again for next week's call. So thank you again, Adam, Jack, Joel, and Mark for your time and energy and efforts to help guide business through this process.
Thank you, Lance.
Thank you, Lance. And thank you, SBA,
Thank you, guys.
for answering the questions.
Absolutely.
Thanks for the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. We are adjourned.
Thanks, guys.